Okay, so let's keep going. So our next topic is intensive farming. This is the extreme or harsh use of land and also the mistreatment of animals in order to make food. And we're going to focus a little more on the chemicals, but I am going to show you some pictures about some of what the animals are dealing with. So in this case, they're using chemicals to kill insects and weeds, which creates the loss of healthy soil and water over time, creates a lot of pollution. So here we see a guy with a mask on and some kind of motorized chemical spraying device, and so he's wearing, a respirator mask to protect him. So these chemicals are so toxic that this guy has to wear a mask, and I'm going to show you some more pictures that are even more extreme as far as protection and chemicals. This picture is showing chickens and just some of the normal conditions that a lot of chickens are in, where they can't really move around. They're trapped in little cages. And you might find yourself voting on some of these topics, and so really think about that as all these topics in this in this set of notes, because a few years ago there was a vote in California as far as just the treatment of chickens on farms, and it was basically saying they had the right to have a certain amount of space and fresh air and stuff, and have a less toxic life. And there was a lot of farmers that ran these kind of farms that were pushing back. They didn't care about the conditions that the animals were in. And there was normal people out there saying, we do care, and this is like abuse of animals. And what they were fighting for was just a little bit of sunlight and a certain amount of fresh air was kind of the main argument. It was like because when you go into these environments where the chickens are, they tend to be sealed off. So imagine having hundreds and hundreds of chickens in their pooping in, and they're living in their poop, like they can't go anywhere, so they're just walking around in their poop in these little cages. And how bad it must smell and how toxic that environment is. So they were just saying they need to have a certain amount of sunlight, certain amount of oxygen able to get into this environment, let alone some space to move around, to not just be suffering in these little cages their whole lives. So this is a truly political issue. People voted on it, and the good news is people in California seem to generally care about the conditions the chickens were in, and the law passed, and they had to have better conditions. So hopefully some of you and your families actually look at the labels for like eggs and milk and stuff like that, for instance, as far as how the animals are treated. I know some people are looking for things to say like they're free range, which can be a little vague. Sometimes it just means they can move around a little bit. So certainly stores like Whole Foods are going to have a lot more options as far as the treatment of the animals, and hopefully that's something that you and your family look for on labels, that the animals are moving around freely and aren't stuck in little cages like this. And I'm going to show you some more pictures as far as what some of the animals are dealing with. So here's another guy with even a larger mask and even a larger motorized device for spraying chemicals onto crops. And then here's some more guys spraying even more chemicals on the crops with protective gear on. So again, if it's this toxic, it seems strange that we're spraying it all over the food that we eat. And a lot of people don't realize this. It's actually really, really important. The main reason why we're told to wash fruits and vegetables is not to get dirt and bacteria off them. The main reason why is to get the chemicals off of them. And again, all these pictures, these are not organic farms. Organic farms are not allowed to do what these guys are doing. Okay, this one's even more extreme. This guy looks like he's got an even more advanced like mask on. And he's got this huge tool that has all these holes in it. And so each hole is spraying chemicals all over these crops. And so it's just giving you more of an impression, hopefully now, of how farming is being done. And this is the norm in the United States. And for some perspective, many countries in Europe have banned this kind of farming because the people in Europe seem to care more about what their food is coming from and how it's being treated. And that's a big difference between the United States and countries in Europe is actually caring maybe more about the quality of the food that they're getting. And then this picture showing just even more extreme. So now we have a huge truck dumping chemicals. And if you've ever seen planes flying over farmland, they're spraying chemicals from the plane to just get more and more chemicals on the crops. And so it does allow for more food production, but it's polluting the soil and the land really badly over time. And we're taking those chemicals into our body when we eat them. There's some pictures to kind of illustrate what's going on with the animals. So this could be seen as somewhat of a company could label that these animals, look, these turkeys, I guess, have the ability to move around. It does look like they've got the sunlight and windows, which is good. But obviously, this isn't a very much space, and they can't move very much, and they're going to be walking around in their own poop and pooping on each other and whatever. So this is where it gets a little tricky with how foods are labeled, because they might say something like they're free range, and that just means it might mean they're just not in a cage. And so some labels are getting even more advanced and saying like pasture raised. So if it says that, that means they're out in the grass. If it says pasture. So, and the rules are strict. They can't lie on their labels, but they can say things that are a little confusing to interpret, but not considered lying, just considered maybe not totally clear. The conditions for pigs can be actually pretty bad. You can see how crammed together these pigs are. There's almost no ability to move, it looks like. And they have done studies that say that pigs are actually smarter than dogs. And so they're going to be able to be smart enough to understand that they're really crammed together. And this is a picture of how farming is often done in the United States. And the term for this is a factory farm, where they basically turn the farm animals into like part of a factory. And in this case, you can see they have almost no freedom to move in any kind of way. And they live their entire life, or most of their life, like this. And this is why some people go vegetarian or vegan and have been protesting the farming industry as far as how it treats animals. And this picture here is kind of the worst of all. It shows that they'll be living in their own poop and things like that. And there have been laws that have been attempted to be passed to protect those pigs. And some politicians have pushed back. And for example, in New Jersey a few years ago, a law passed to improve the conditions for pigs. And it was like 85% of the people in New Jersey said, yes, we don't want them in situations like this. And they should have room to move around, maybe a little more like these cows do. And so 85% of the citizens in New Jersey voted for this to change. But then the governor struck that down and didn't let it happen, the governor of New Jersey. And he actually was found out that he had friends in the pig farming industry, and that those friends did not want him to do anything that would affect their business. And so even though, like I said, like 80% or more of the citizens in New Jersey said we don't want this anymore, and I think they weren't really doing the farming there. I think they were buying the pigs from other places and saying we don't want to buy them from these places. That governor, because of his friends in the pig industry, shut that law down and didn't let it pass. And it just really shows how politicians are not necessarily serving the will of the people, and are actually maybe sometimes more influenced by corporations and their friends who run certain businesses, which is actually not how United States politics is supposed to work. And if you want to look it up, that governor, his name is Chris Christie, and he actually ran for president in the last presidential election. So here we have a farm with a lot of cows, not walking around in grass, as you can see, kind of walk around in mud, not really great conditions. And if you've ever driven up Highway 5, you may have seen these huge cow farms. Here you can see they're all really kind of crammed together in this picture, not a lot of space to move. And this is back again to this factory farming concept. They're probably being milked, so they sort of treat them like they're part of a giant machine, like they're part of the milking machine. And a lot of people feel like the animals are not really being respected and treated very well, as they are sort of put into these machines and just not really seeing them as living organisms with feelings, and who, and that suffer in their own ways, but see, as just part of the machine. It's kind of interesting that this one's looking back, almost as if maybe it's looking at the person taking the picture, like, what's going on here? So this is very typical in American farming, and I think it's important that students know that. And I know out there are a lot of families in Calabasas and in Los Angeles that are making choices to not support these kind of farms. So hopefully that's something that you'll consider in the future. So our options here are organic farming, and they don't harm the biosphere with toxic chemicals. That's not allowed, and they're not allowed to use hormones on the animals or like other drugs and stuff, which the other farming does, and usually are better to animals. But by definition, organic does not mean that the animals are in great conditions. And I do think there needs to be a label for animals like meat and eggs and milk that's even a level above organic. That's like, usually the term is humane, that they're treated in really humane ways, pasture raised, pasture grown, that they eat grass, because a lot of the cows and animals are eating corn, which they didn't evolve to eat, stuff like that, so that the animals, so that we know, based on the labels of the food, what the animals are really experiencing, and we can make choices. And some people think that stuff gets too expensive, but just speaking from my side of things, I only buy organic milk that's grass-fed, and pasture-raised. I only eat eggs that are free-range and say that they're eating the right, seeds and things like that. And I also only buy a lot of certain organic produce, and especially things that are roots like potatoes, because roots are going to absorb those chemicals. So I've heard that just something to think about. That it's really important if you're going to eat potatoes, onions, carrots, things that are under the ground, that it's extra important to eat organic, because those are root plants. Those are the roots that we're eating, and so those roots are going to absorb those chemicals that we're spraying on the land. So if you're interested in this, look into those things, and hopefully that's something that your family's already doing. These are some different things that organic farms do. They use cover crops, which help with the nutrient cycles, and it helps with fighting weeds, so they don't have to use as many chemicals. Contour plowing, which keeps soil in place and allows for more crops and helps the soil a lot. Controlled grazing, this helps with nutrient cycles, helps manage water loss, and sustains the herd over longer periods of time, so they don't overeat, basically. Using insects to control other insects, so like using praying mantises to kill bugs that eat the crops. You can also use ladybugs. Ladybugs kill insects that are eating the crops, so using natural predators to control the pests. And then also rotating crops, which helps with nutrient cycles and reducing nutrient loss. So if you look here, we see nutrient cycles, nutrient cycles, nutrient cycles. That's incredibly important, and I did address that in an earlier topic in Unit 5. All right, we're going to stop there.